And most people are angry. Most people are sad. Most people don't feel good enough. Most people feel abandoned, right? And most people don't feel lovable because of their childhood experience. And so we carry that with us through the rest of our lives. And if we don't deal with it, we end up dead. It's that simple.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Delbra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. Today, I have a very special guest, a childhood hero of mine, Mr. Theo Fleury. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, so just a background on Theo Fleury. If you're not a Canadian, you're not obsessed with hockey. Theo's an Olympic gold medalist, Stanley Cup Champion, World Junior Champion. He's pretty legendary in the hockey world, especially if you're a Canadian. Another thing about Theo is he's, for players in the NHL, he has a pretty small stature, and guys like that are even more impressive in such a physical game. And to add to that, he's known for his physical nature on the ice, getting into scraps, very aggressive style. So it's an interesting dynamic there. He scored over 1,000 points in his career. So, a very consistent scorer and just an all-around legend. And he's kind of known for nowadays, he's an advocate for kids who have dealt with trauma in their lives, conservative values, freedom, especially with all the things that have been going on in Canada recently. He's been very outspoken against the Liberal government. So have I. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing as a Canadian these days. And we do have an election coming up, and I'm super excited to have this conversation, Theo. So welcome to the show. So I just want let's just start off with some. Before we get spicy, we'll just talk some hockey questions. So just being, who you are. Like I said, what are you? 5'7", 5'6", something like that. 5'8",
5'6",
5'6". So,
yeah.
I mean, if you look at the players in the NHL, these guys are monsters, right? And you were accelerating in a sport like hockey that is incredibly physical at that level. And I just want to know, being someone who is undersized in every game you're going out there, and you're also getting a reputation for being a scrapper, and guys are probably trying to take your head off. Was that a difficult thing to play in those conditions night after night?
No, it wasn't. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a small person, right? I see somebody who, I think first and foremost was ultra competitive. I hated to lose. And, when you have that kind of mindset, it doesn't matter how big the guys you were playing against, right? And not only that, I was blessed with, God-given talent and ability. And I just knew that, I had to, work harder than everybody else in order to, have a successful professional career, and, one of the things I figured out early on in my junior career was that, the majority of guys that I was playing against were bluffers, right? Because I was willing to die in order to win, and figured out early on that, not a lot of people carried the same attitude that I had towards winning and being successful. And when those guys wouldn't compete at the same level as me, now you have a successful formula for having a long career.
I've read, so in your book, I think you wrote it came out in 2009, Playing with Fire. You talk a lot about, you would go into a lot of these games often coming off of benders and things like that. I'm just wondering, what was did you have a strong off ice training regimen? What was your training like off the ice were you lifting weights? Were you focusing on things like that? Or was it mostly like a lot of partying going on?
Well, like I said, I was ultra talented. I don't think there's very many guys who played the game who had the talent that I had, right? And so my talent, obviously got me through, but was I partying any less than anybody else? No, I wasn't. That was the culture. That's the way, when I broke in the league, it was still pretty old school, I made $90,000 my first year in the NHL. So, the money wasn't big, and that's sort of the mentality that we had, play hard on the ice, play hard off the ice. And, I think I probably was the only guy, who had the courage to write about, the mentality of the game, the way it was played back then. And we lived hard, we partied hard, we played hard. And, I think that people back then, we were more relatable, because the money wasn't, astronomical like it is nowadays. And, there was no social media, there was no, what I mean? So, but at the end of the day, just because we played hockey and we're famous doesn't mean that, we're not normal people and we have normal lives and normal issues and normal problems like everybody else, and the money, doesn't resolve those problems. I think it adds to those problems, and, they say money corrupts and it does. Ultimately, it does.
And like you said, it was a different time. And nowadays, when we look at professional sports, like you said, there's more money, there's more eyes on you with social media. There's a lot more people involved, I think, in, developing athletes now as compared to in the 80s. Just the level of training, the level of, I don't want to say how they take it seriously, but just there's a lot more involved and probably the expectations are different from, back then. I wanted to ask you about something that's been going on in the NHL, and that's kind of where teams have been doing it for a couple of years now, where they're kind of circumventing the salary cap. So the way they do this is around the trade deadline. One of the big stars of a team, I believe last year, the guy's name is Mark Stone of the Vegas Knights. He gets injured, and so his salary is kind of off the books. And then what they're able to do is pick up a couple of free agents for the playoff run. And then, playoffs roll around and Mark Stone is now healed again, and he gets to go in there. And it's almost like a legal way of cheating right now. And
Right.
Sure enough, playoffs are starting in a couple of weeks, and Mark Stone is injured, and people are thinking, oh, he could potentially magically get healed again. How do you feel about this? The circumventing of the salary cap. Is it a problem? Should it be addressed? Is it good or bad for the game?
Well, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So, everybody, franchises make their money in the playoffs, right? The regular season, they get their salaries, through fans buying tickets and all that, they get that part. And the gravy is when, the playoffs show up. And the longer you can stay in the playoffs, the more gates you get, the more money, you put in the owner's pocket. So, I just see that as, a smart general manager, a smart president, smart owner who are, just following the rules, which were made up by, the NHL. So, if one team does it, why can't every team do it, right? So, and just because they won the Stanley Cup, yeah, there's more of an exclamation point on that fact. But if they lost, nobody'd be talking about it.
True. If you had your way, and let's say, you ran the rules of the NHL, do you think that you would just keep that, or would that be something that you think should be taken out so that, that salary cap space doesn't just open up for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea, to, take it out so that, that doesn't happen again, or, you know. But it's obviously, it's obviously a topic of discussion, and so, but I don't have $1 billion and I don't own a team, and so to me, it's like I don't really follow the game very close anymore. It's something that I used to do, and what I do today is probably way more important than I ever did, on the ice, and so that's been my sole focus and sort of my new phase in life that that I take a lot of pride and passion, on my post hockey career, because let's face it, I think I've been more successful in my post hockey career than I was during my hockey career, right?
Mm-hmm. And so nowadays, I guess we'll just get right into it. Like you're becoming very outspoken politically, especially with the Trudeau government and sort of how the direction that they're taking this country, especially with, this very like hyper progressive, culture that has happened over the last 10 years. It seems to me that when it really initiated was basically when Trump got elected. That's when I noticed a lot of these real lefties coming out of the woodwork and just getting super triggered about everything. I think it is kind of swinging in the other direction now. At least it's becoming acceptable to criticize these people and sort of mock these people. I mean, I've talked about it on the show before. I'm not a progressive or anything like that. I also don't really identify as a conservative. I'm somewhere in the middle. And recently, you've really talked about how basically our leader is a fucking idiot and all this stuff, and had a lot of different opinions on these subjects. Right now, what do you think is like the biggest threat to Canada and to Western culture?
Communism.
Marxism.
100%. Well, it's all the same, right? Communist Marxism, fascism, it's all the same. It all leads to one place, and that's, like communism been tried, I don't know how many times in the history of our world, but, the only thing that comes out of communism is mass death, which is what we're seeing on the planet, is people are, dropping dead, every second, every minute of every hour of every day, right? That's communism. That's the only thing that comes out of communism. And if you look at all of the policies, all of the new laws that are being put in place, all roads lead to populating the planet, right? That's where we're headed, right? So if that's the case, right, if they all want us dead, then I really have nothing to lose and everything to gain by exposing, these people, because, anybody who knows anything about history and the history of communism knows that, 100 million people have died as the direct result of communist regimes. That's sort of their, MO.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody benefits. People starve to death. People can't afford to live, and that's exactly what we're seeing, right? We're seeing this being played out. And so I'm just calling it out, right?
Yeah. Have you received a lot of backlash from the mainstream?
Don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care. I don't care. Don't care.
It's interesting how if you do speak out against certain agendas, they go out of their way to deplatform and cancel you and things like this. Why?
Well, the only way you can be canceled is if you want to be canceled.
Yeah, if you accept it, right? If you quit.
Yeah. That's why a person like me is such a threat to them, is because I'm not afraid of them. I know they're a bunch of cowards. Anybody can see a coward, and they're all cowards, right? Because they have no argument. They can't debate. They need to, own the media. They need to, it's all it is, when people call people conspiracy theorists, what conspiracy theorists are is we recognize patterns.
Yes.
And pattern recognition is among the highest IQ, people on the planet. So, I see myself as a very smart, brilliant human being who's had every kind of experience you can experience in life. And, I know what abuse looks like. And, I believe that every single issue we have in society starts with trauma. And then you pick your poison as to how you're going to deal with this emotional pain that's left behind from trauma. And who are the biggest perpetrators of trauma on the planet is government. They're the abusers. And nobody, like we talk about systemic racism and transphobia and, all this bullshit, but nobody talks about systemic government abuse. And the reason why we're in the situation that we're in is because of systemic government abuse. Right? And so, when people try to identify what they are politically, I'm just a true blue patriot. I'm anti-government. I don't need government involved in my life. I don't need the government to look after me. I'm very capable of doing that. And, I don't need government. I really don't, vote, pay your taxes, and stay out of jail. Those are my three responsibilities as a citizen of Canada. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need government involved in, paying my bills and feeding me and all that stuff. I'm capable of working. I'm smart enough to, create businesses, and, they hate people like us.
No, you're absolutely right.
Right. So, the reason why I'm being attacked all the time is because I don't care. And they know that I'm not afraid of them. Right. And yeah, so they eliminate me from this planet. Please do, because I know I'm going to a way of a fucking better place than I am right now.
So have you, around COVID time, that is kind of when my mindset shifted as a Canadian. I went into some dark places. There was a lot of people in my life, unfortunately, who really bought the COVID narrative hook, line, and sinker. I was getting a lot of hate because I run a Jiu Jitsu academy, and in Jiu Jitsu, it's close quarters, right? So people were like, oh yeah, Jiu Jitsu is going to be really bad for COVID because obviously you need training partners to be in contact with, and oh, it's going to spread, and you don't want your gym to be the gym where people are dying of COVID and it ends up on the news and all that. Like every bit of fear mongering in the book from the closest people in my life, from friends, family, coaches. So I was one of the guys who, I remember it was 4 years ago, pretty much a month ago almost, that it started. We were seeing these images on the mainstream media, and we were seeing images of China where people are in suits spraying people down, and they said, oh, this contagion is coming from China, and they were really pushing the fear. And for me, like, I don't identify as like a high IQ person, but I do feel that I recognize patterns, and I was sort of like, this is really interesting how they're pushing this so hard on us. They're pushing, I noticed they're pushing fear, and they're also pushing this idea of this virus as if it's like the plague, and just this wave of, how should I put it, coordinated, like all the mainstream media had decided to coordinate and push this one narrative. And for me, red flags were going off, and I was like, guys, I think I was the only one at the dinner table before they locked us down. I was the only one at the dinner table that was like, guys, don't you think this is fucking weird? And everyone was looking at me like, and then they called me conspiracy theorist, crazy, all these things, the closest people in my life. And that was kind of the time when I sort of started seeing things differently. I started seeing things differently against the mainstream media, which I had always sort of thought was like informative. And now I was looking at it like, oh no, there's definitely agendas being pushed here. They need you to believe a certain thing. They're talking every day. Oh, this many people have died from COVID today. This many people have died. And I'm like, why would you write how many people have died and not how many people have recovered? Why are the people who are dying old and, they have immune issues and obese, and they're not generally the healthiest of people when everyone else is recovering? Why are they pushing this so hard? And so for me, I just I got gaslit by a lot of people, and that was when I sort of realized, okay, I'm kind of on my own here in terms of my circle, and also that's when I started really looking at the government as I was, let's just say, I was no longer very proud to be Canadian, right? I had lost that patriotism that was kind of bred into me. You know, when you're a young kid in Canada, you're going to the assemblies, you're singing the anthem before every time, you're doing Remembrance Day and all this stuff. This is before they changed the anthem to become more gender neutral, which is so woke and grammatically inaccurate, the way that they've changed the anthem, and embarrassing. So that's when I won't say that I'm anti-government. I'm not quite on the side of the spectrum that is anarchical, but I am small government. I like limited government. And before I sort of trusted the government, that was kind of the event that changed my opinion. And my question to you is, were you always anti-government? Did you kind of go through it, you know?
No, I followed the rules. I drank the Kool-Aid for many, many years, right? And then, you know, because you know, I was groomed by one of the, you know, most notorious pedophiles in Canadian history,
Graham?
right? So, yeah, so I knew what the grooming process looked like, and I knew what it felt like, and so I saw that they were grooming the population, right, to fall in line, right, and
They treat us like cattle in a way, the way that they program us, right? And they call the TV is called programming. Like literally, you put on the mainstream media and they're literally programming you to think. And it's interesting if you can step back and look at it and be a quote conspiracy theorist. It's interesting how you can look at it from an objective lens and see the things that they're doing. It's very similar to how you would herd animals into the slaughterhouse.
It's grooming. That's what it is, right? It's grooming, and but you know, here's another thing about trauma is, you know, the I would say the whole entire world is traumatized, right? There's nobody who's been exempt from experiencing trauma. It doesn't have to be as extreme as mine, but trauma is very subtle, right? And so when you're traumatized, guess what? You can't think critically because you're only surviving, right? And so those of us who you know, live a spiritual existence, we see right through that because we're living on a very high vibration. And so those of us who live in these high vibrations, we can't be affected by evil, right? And so the majority of the population who lives down where all these, you know, these evil psychopaths live, you know, they feed off of that energy. They feed off the fear and they feed off, right? And so, you know, we're in a spiritual and psychological war. You know, there's not tanks driving up and down the road. You know, there's no armies, you know, around or whatever. You know, they're playing on our psyche, right?
It's this.
And so, yeah, 100%.
Just holding up my
100%.
phone for those listening.
Yeah, you know, they're using all of these tools to psychologically keep us in fear. And when you step out of the fear and realize what exactly they are doing, then the fear leaves us, and then we go to our spiritual base, and that's where we live. Because at the end of the day, God wins. And when you realize that God wins, you're just watching a fucking movie. You're watching, you know, everything is planned, everything is orchestrated. You know, it's like, you know, like for me yesterday, when I saw the picture of the police officer who's in full riot gear standing outside of a protest, like I started laughing hysterically. Because it's like, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. We have a guy in full riot gear standing across staring at protesters who can't afford food, who can't afford to put gas in their car, are losing their houses. Like, common sense here. Like, it's so ridiculous. So for me, like, press the button already. Like, we need a full reset here because it's gotten that absolutely insane. And the insane are running the asylum.
That's true. When you say we need a reset, do you mean a revolution? What are you referring to?
We need God to step in and do his thing.
What does that look like?
I have no idea. That's up to him.
I was going to ask you, I assume by what you've already said that you believe in God. I was going to ask you about God. I grew up in a very...
It's the only reason why I'm still here. It's the only reason why I'm still here. Right?
I grew up in a very atheistic family. Nobody I was really connected with was religious. But it was when I had my daughter.
But it's not about religion. It's spirit. It's about spirituality. You know, spirituality is completely different than religion. You know what I mean? Is I get to choose the God of my own understanding, and it's influenced by no one but what I believe.
Okay, so that's very similar to how I feel now. Like I don't identify with a religion. For me, religions are orchestrated by man, and a lot of the time they are commandeered in a way to take money from people, to manipulate people, right? In different, many different horrible ways, from sexual abuse to wars to just taking their money, all types of things. But when we talk about God, I think you and I might be on the same page. When I had my daughter, that's when I started actually thinking about, oh shit, maybe there is something out there, right? When you look into your child's eyes for the first time and you think, how could this be random, right? When you hold their little hand and you see all the little detail, you're like, hey, how could this just be a random thing? And you start thinking about God. And I think where people get mixed up, especially atheists, is that when they hear the word God, it's like a triggering word for them because they don't want views being pushed on them.
They're programmed to go straight to religion.
Yes. But when I think about God, I don't think about religion. I think about a higher power. I think about spirituality, and I think about something that is calling me. That just this natural feeling inside. It's not like a heaven or hell thing. It's like it's within you. So do you identify as with any one religion, or are you just on that plane where it's no, I have a relationship with God, you know?
Yeah, because spirituality is individual, right? It's not God is everywhere. God is in me, right? So to me, it's about a personal relationship, and what I believe in is nobody's fucking business, right? Just like I don't care what you believe in. Just believe in something. You know what I mean? And make it your own. And I know when I have God in my life, I don't do cocaine anymore. I don't drink anymore. I don't abuse relationships. You know what I mean? Like I just become a completely different person than I used to be, right? I'm not angry. I'm not resentful. I'm just a better overall person because I turned my will and my life over to the care of God. I hit my knees and I surrendered, and I turned my will and my life over to the care of God. And I said, you know what, God, I know that you've always had a plan for me. The only time the plan has gone sideways was when I was running the show. So I'm going to turn all this over to you. I'm going to give you back the power. And in that, I want you to give me my purpose for my life. And all of those things have come to fruition, and all those things are true. So to tell me that I went from this insane, addict, alcoholic, crazy person to a person who has compassion, integrity, cares about people. How does that happen? Right? How does that happen? Well, because I surrendered. I surrendered and I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. And I let Him take the wheel and drive the bus. Because when I drive the bus, it always crashes.
Do you pray or go to church or do anything like this?
Yeah, I pray every day. Sometimes 20, 30, 40 times a day, right? You know, because I suffer from mental health struggles, right? And the only thing that works for me is prayer, meditation, listening to frequency, you know, grounding, you know, that's what works for me.
Do you believe that there's an agenda through our Western culture that suppresses God and suppresses the belief in God?
100%. Yeah, we're in the last fight, good versus evil. This isn't about political parties. This isn't nothing. This is good versus evil. That's it.
One thing I find interesting is generally the most like hard left progressive people tend to be atheistic. That not only do they
100%.
not believe in God, they have been groomed to despise God. It's like the idea of God. They scoff at it, they make fun of it as if it's like ridiculous that people would believe in it, right? Whereas conservative people, I think, are much more in touch with their spiritual side. What do you think of this? Like like I was saying, the most progressive people tend to be the most atheistic and almost anti-spiritual or anti-God. But funny thing that I noticed is these people still have a yearning for like a religion. Like they need something to lead them, whether it's going to be some
they're
progressive movement or the government or
Right.
NASA or whatever it is. And you can
Well,
always tell that they have these deities that they respect so much, because if you question any of these things, whether it's the vaccine or healthcare or the public school system or, like I said, NASA, if you question any of these things, the reactions you get are wild. Like they fucking go so crazy at you. So I think as humans, we just naturally have this innate yearning for a leader or a god, a religion.
Yeah, well, they just want to belong somewhere, right? And that's why cultism has been very popular over the centuries, right? And liberalism is a mental disorder, right? That's what it is,
Nowadays, I would say yes. But I kind of,
Oh,
I think
maybe
that
because communism is slow drip, right? They don't actually come out and say that we're like, the liberals will never say that we follow a communist ideology. The NDP will never say that they follow a communist agenda, because they can't. Because if they did, nobody would follow them. So it's this grooming of manipulation, coercion, bait and switch, and all of these things, and that's how they can get to control the minds of these people who are vulnerable, right? Who are looking, because they have unresolved trauma, right? Because to me, everything comes back to trauma. Everything comes back to trauma. That's why trauma is so such a big part of this. And so they prey on people's vulnerabilities, fill them full of, of these manipulation and coercion and all this stuff, right? And then ultimately, once they have them, then this is how it all plays out. And why do you think they're trying to delete history? Because the last time we went through a script like this was 80 years ago, Nazi Germany. And the same script is being played out to a T right now. But if you don't know anything about that part of history, then you're going to say, when somebody tells you, hey, wow, this looks like Nazi Germany in the 1940s. Oh, you're full of shit. You're a conspiracy theorist. No, do your own fucking research. Right? But they won't. They won't, because liberals are lazy. They're lazy. They're not free thinkers. They can't think on their own. They need somebody else to think for them.
When we say liberals, like, a lot of my values, I think I wasn't politically active throughout my 20s even. Like
Neither was I.
I didn't think about it at all. Actually, the time that I sort of started thinking about politics is when I remember I got into a spat with a feminist on social media, and that was the first time I started thinking about it. Like, oh, what the hell? Like, I'm not allowed to say certain words, and just like triggering someone in that effect. I was like, okay, what is this feminism we're talking about? And then I look into things more and I realize, oh, okay, there's like this whole culture war that's been sort of bubbling and brewing. And then it just sort of has exploded over the last little bit. But truthfully, my values lie, like, I'm kind of like what I guess would be considered a classical liberal from the 90s. But the Overton window has shifted so much that if you say the word liberal now, it immediately gets associated with like a far left, hyper progressive, feminist, mask wearing, blue hair, LGBTQ person, right? And so, like, my values at the core haven't. Well, I feel like my heart's in the same place. I can't lie. After having a kid and starting my own business, my values have changed for sure. Yeah. From when I was a young kid in high school, when I really, let's be honest, I didn't know fucking anything, right? Like, and as you get older, you become, at least I think most men, especially if they've had kids, if they've started businesses, they do lean more conservatively. And the Overton window has shifted so much that now the word liberal is just like, it has these associations. Do you identify as you're a conservative now? Is that how you would identify?
No, I'm just a patriot, just a true blue patriot.
How do you feel about our conservative party? Everyone's like, oh, PO is going to save us or whatever, but I don't really like any of them, to be honest.
No, we ain't voting ourselves out of this mess. So,
do you think elections are, I don't know if rigged is the word, but do you think that they're portrayed to us?
They're manipulated. Yeah. Like, if you look at China's interference in 2019 and 2021, that's probably true. And if that's probably true, then we have an illegitimate government, okay, who is illegitimately passing bills and laws because they didn't actually win an election. They were placed, so, and, you have the leader of the World Economic Forum, a guy named Klaus Schwab, who has basically said that he owns 50% of the 338 who sit in the House at Parliament. He's actually said it. There's video out there. There's video proof, that, Trudeau is the most compromised, blackmailed leader in the history of our country.
Do you think he's Castro's son?
I have no idea. Don't really care, really. I just want him gone, right?
But do you think that if he goes, the problems are not solved, but can move in another direction, or is this scripted?
That's why I say we need a complete reset. Canada needs a complete reset. We need an overhaul of government. We need a constitutional republic. We need to get out of the British Commonwealth, right? And as you can see, all the British Commonwealth countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, right? Why do you think we're being attacked? Is because they can pretty much, whoever's in power can basically do whatever they want and face zero consequences, And if you look I think we can start using the word treason, right? We can start using the word treason because, this country doesn't look anything like it did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? Freedom is gone. Like it's non-existent, right? When we have fully, armored police officers going to a protest, that's when you know that we are no longer a free country.
Are you referring to the COVID?
No,
trucker
I'm talking about what's going on in the country right now with the carbon tax protests, right? We have fully armed, ready for, that are showing up at these protests, peaceful protests.
Certain protests, though, it's interesting. Like after the whole BLM thing, the George Floyd thing, those protests were kind of just let. It's like they were authorized. They were allowed to occur, and whole cities lost a lot of businesses and people died and all that. So they're picking and choosing which protests they're going to.
George Soros's army, right?
How do you feel about climate change? I think I know.
What climate change?
Yeah. Do you think it's?
I haven't seen anything different happening. The winter's still the winter, summer's still the summer, right? So
Well, one of the big sort of things that they push is that the sea levels are rising, and we've seen that they're not. The sea levels are not rising, and not only are they not rising, but the elites and the banks still sell properties that are along the coastlines, right? Like these are, if the sea levels were rising, why would the banks allow these properties to be built along the coast for these elites, right? These are going to be underwater theoretically in 15 years. Anyone who looked at what Al Gore said, 10, 15 years ago has seen that none of that has really happened. I just saw in my story the other day, there's like a time lapse of the water levels over the last couple decades. It hasn't changed, right? But they keep pushing these narratives as if it is something that will happen, hoping that, people will just forget, right? People will just forget about it. So what do you think is the reason why they're pushing the climate change agenda so much?
To bring in communism. It's pretty simple, right? They're destroying countries, they're taxing people, through the roof. Inflation is happening. People can't afford to live in this environment, right?
And when people can't afford to live, that's like a perfect environment to bring in more government control, more communism. Oh, we need equality. Don't worry, the government will provide for you. And it makes it all that much more appealing to somebody who is ignorant and poor.
Yep, 100%. Right? It's like I said, it's the exact same script they used 80 years ago. The exact same tactics. It's all the same.
What do you think was the purpose of the COVID-19? I don't even call it a pandemic. In fact, that word kind of triggers me because it's the flu, as we know. And I said it was the flu when it was happening, and people like literally disowned me. Friends and family like never talked to me again. They still don't talk to me because I had that view. What do you think was the reason of it? Was it like a test run to see what they could get away with?
Yeah, they would. And to me, my God that I believe in, he doesn't create viruses. Man creates viruses, right? And gain of function research is against the law. So why is it happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, it's such a corrupt system that we live in, right? And so, and because they control the media, right? It's a pretty easy sell for them, right? But what's happened is that, people who have platforms, right? And anybody can have a platform, right? You have a platform now. And what's happened is,
Not for long.
well, they can try all they want, but we've already won the information war because nobody's watching mainstream TV anymore,
That's true.
right?
Well, boomers are. A lot of boomers do.
Right. But we've won the information war, and they can no longer get ahead of, what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. Like, anybody who's awake knows what the end goal is and the end agenda is, and that's depopulating the planet, right? That's the end goal. And all roads lead to that. Okay? But, like I said, those of us who have had platforms and are not afraid, and, they've been trying to cancel me for years now. And I just refuse to be canceled because I give it back to them, right away. I don't cower. I'm not afraid, and that's why they don't like people like us, right? Is because we're not going to fall in line. I'm never going to fall in line. Sorry. It's just not going to happen, right?
Now, don't be sorry.
Who
Who do you think is going to win the Canadian election?
Well, it looks like conservatives are going to have a majority, but I don't think there's going to be another election. So
Explain what you mean.
there's not going to be another election. There won't be another election in Canada.
Do you mean that they're going to cancel it, or do you mean that
Yep.
you think that's happening?
Oh yeah, we're working towards it for sure. Why hasn't Trudeau stepped down?
Well, I think he's just too much of an egotistical piece of shit to step down, to be honest.
He's like Klaus Schwab even said it. He said by 2025 there'll be no more elections on the planet.
I've heard other people say that too. I don't know that that's true though, because one thing elections do is they give the people the illusion that they have some kind of control. They have some kind of ability to dictate something.
We're beyond that point now. Right? So if they can steal an election in the United States of America, Canada's chicken feed.
Yes. So do you think that when Biden got elected, that was stolen?
100%. A guy that shits his pants every day is the leader of the free world. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's fucking crazy, man. At least at least Trump is he's fucking comedically hilarious. There's things about Trump that I don't like. I don't like how much he supports Israel, but again, all politicians kind of play that. They kind of toe that line. I don't like how hard he pushed the vaccine during COVID, or how he kind of allowed the lockdowns to happen. I'm pretty sure he's done some horrible things back in his, when he was a tycoon builder in New York and things like that. I'm pretty sure he fucked over a lot of people. But at least he's hilarious. He's fucking hilarious.
When you're in business, the only way to get to the top is sometimes you got to do shit that
they all do it, right?
Yeah,
they all do it, and I mean,
that's how business is set up. You know what I mean? So, I'm a big Trump supporter. I've met him a few times, and he is absolutely nothing like the way the media portrays him to be. I see him as a kind, and you tell a lot from a guy's handshake when you first meet him. And he looked me straight in the eye. It was a great handshake. And, I knew right away that, that he was a man of integrity and cared about people. So, I don't see that So
I've seen a lot of interviews with people who have worked for him, and they've all have really good things to say about him. We're talking about like housekeepers and things like that. They all loved him. They all said he was great. And I do believe that, you know, he did a lot of great things economically for the States when he was in office, aside from allowing the lockdowns and things like that to happen. I feel like, you know,
yeah, well, but he still had the majority of Obama's people around him that he couldn't get rid of. You know what I mean? Because you know, Washington's corrupt, Canada's corrupt, like every government in the world is corrupt, right?
yes,
You know,
of course.
and so, you know, and as a politician, you gotta play a certain way, and you got to do certain things that you don't necessarily want to do. You know what I mean? So, you know, like
Who do you think wins?
some of the dumbest people that I've ever met on the planet are politicians.
Yes.
Like just absolute fucking dummies who don't have a clue about anything. Nothing.
Who do you think wins the next election in the States, or is there going to be no election?
No election. No
Really?
election. That's my prediction.
You think they're just going to be like, actually, we're not doing an election. Biden's
Yep.
going to be the president. That's how it is?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a president even, or is it going to be like a new system?
Well, it's the Clintons and the Obamas who are running the United States, right? So it's not hard. It's not hard to see. Just watch Joe Biden for fucking 5 minutes, and you know that he ain't running shit.
No, he's not running anything.
No,
He doesn't know where he is half the time.
no.
What do you have? Somebody who's experiencing trauma, like childhood trauma. What is some advice that, you know, after going through what you've gone through, what is some advice that you would give to that person on the way to recovery?
Tell your story. Tell your story. Talk about the pain. Talk about the suffering. Talk about the abuse, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual abuse. Find a safe person who's not going to judge you and tell your story. Don't carry it around with you, because if you do, it'll kill you. It's as simple as that.
What about the same question, but with somebody who deals with addiction?
Well, addiction is emotional pain management caused by trauma. It's a coping mechanism. That's all addiction is. It's a coping mechanism. That's all it is. It suppresses emotional pain. And if you can't talk about the emotional pain, then you're going to gravitate towards addiction, because it's the only way you're going to survive. The pain.
When you say talk to someone, it could be someone you trust, a counselor, or even just to like
Somebody
you
who's
public
not-
speak about trauma, right?
Somebody who's not going to judge you, right? Because that's what we're all afraid of. We're all afraid of being judged. And so because we're afraid of being judged, we don't tell our stories, right? And I always tell people, you know, if you have trauma, you're not in the minority, you're in the majority, right? And, you know, for me, you know, I hid a secret for 27 years of my life. And because I hid that secret, I was living a lie, right? I was basically living a lie. And in 2009, when I found the courage and the strength to tell my story, it was no longer a secret. And then guess what happened? I got run over. I got run over by people who had the same story as me, and they knew they could come to me and tell me the story because I wouldn't judge them. I would be compassionate, empathetic. I would listen. I would say, I believe you, right? And in society, we haven't set up that space for those people to be able to come and say, hey, this happened to me, right? And that's why, you know, why do you think we have a mental health crisis? Why do we think we have an addiction crisis? Because we have a trauma crisis, right? Because you don't just wake up one day and have mental illness. You don't just wake up one day and have an addiction issue. You have unresolved trauma that you have never talked about. That's what's going on, right? And so I've spent the last 20 years advocating for safe environments and safe spaces where I can ask the question, what happened to you? Right? I don't look at the addiction. I don't look at the mental illness. I look at what happened to you. That's what I look for. Where's the trauma? Where's the trauma in your story? Because once I know what the trauma is, then I can solve the mental health issue and I can solve the addiction issue. But until you tell me the trauma piece, I can't help you.
How do you solve it? Talking about it?
Yeah, that's the first step. First step in the process is tell your story. Because it's trauma is the commonality. It's the thread, right? It's the thread, right? And, mental illness is because of your trauma. Addiction is because of your trauma. And you're coping and managing with, right? And addiction is just medicine to help with the mental illness, with the emotional pain. Mental illness is emotional pain. That's all it is. And so, yeah, we need something to numb us out.
Mm-hmm.
When, I always tell people I've hit more rock bottoms in sobriety than I ever did drinking. Why? Because I'm actually feeling something. And I have to sit in the uncomfortability of those feelings to understand. Am I sad? Am I angry? Am I right? But if you just keep dumping addiction in to numb it out, nothing's going to change until you stop, the coping mechanism. And then you actually have to deal with what you're feeling, right? And most people are angry. Most people are sad. Most people don't feel good enough. Most people feel abandoned, right? And most people don't feel lovable because of their childhood experience. And so we carry that with us through the rest of our lives. And if we don't deal with it, we end up dead. It's that simple.
Would you say that the junior hockey infrastructure and I guess the hockey infrastructure in Canada overall, is it a...
No, it's societal. You can't single out one entity. It's societal, right? It's societal. And it starts with government, right? Government is the biggest problem that's happened to society. Bottom line.
If it was up to you, would you prefer things to be like anarchy, like there is no government, or do you like the idea of a government that is very, very small?
Small. Yeah. Run it like a business. Run it like a business, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's going to be a societal collapse, and what does that look like?
Well, it's got to come down before it can get better, right? So I see that happening. But unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of dead people, when that happens. Call it anarchy, call it whatever you want. But that's the communist ideology, and that's what the communist ideology spits out is mass death. That's it. Doesn't bring anything to the table other than that. Pain, suffering, Because when I'm out in the real world, guess what I see? All I see is pain and suffering. That's it. I don't see joy. I don't see happiness. I see people who are hurting emotionally, physically, spiritually, pain. And communists love to inflict pain on their victims. And that's what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a spiritual base, it's really tough for you. Like, it's really hard.
So do you think that the way to sort of turn the tide is through God, spirituality,
No, it's each and every one of us individually deciding that we're going to go on a healing journey.
What does that look like? What kind of healing?
Well, whatever you want. It's your personal healing journey. So whatever that looks like to you. But how vulnerable are you going to be? Because vulnerability is the way out. Vulnerability is the way out of this.
Mm.
Yep.
How do you feel about firearms? I assume you like them.
Nope.
Don't like them.
I think anybody who carries a gun is a fucking coward.
Really? Interesting.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What about
the
ability to defend yourself and not to rely on like the government to protect you?
Why do I need protection? You know what I mean?
Because there's unpredictable people in the world.
Well, okay. Well, if God so chooses that that's my time and that's the way I'm going to go out, I can't control it.
Okay. But one of the playbooks...
Two people having guns, what does that solve? Nothing. Doesn't solve anything. Right? Doesn't. If you carry a gun, you're a fucking coward. That's the bottom line. Whether you're on the good side or the bad side, you know, it's one of the most powerful instruments you could possibly have in your hand. Like I had a gun in my mouth and I could have ended my life just by doing this. That's way too much power. That's way too much power.
One of the playbooks of these governments before they, you know, take control is to disarm the population. And we have seen steps towards that. We've seen, you know, the Trudeau government trying to limit firearms and things like this. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that having that autonomy to be able to defend your home is important?
I don't think I should ever be put in that position where I have to. Right?
Well, I agree with that.
Right? So, wars have been created to create wealth, not to solve problems and issues, right? And
yes.
The unfortunate thing is the left and the right, or I think the right is probably more inclined to debate, whereas the left won't debate because they have no argument. They have no argument, right? And until we're able to sit across from each other and debate without, creating chaos and fucking craziness, that's how we solve these problems, and that's how we solve these issues. It's just through debate, not through guns and violence and fucking craziness, right? What and to me, when you carry anger, rage, and resentment in society, you have no place to put that, right? So, when all of these movements started, right? Black Lives Matter, Hamas, even the Freedom Convoy. Now I got a place where I can go and act out my anger because I have to act it out somewhere. You know what I mean? And so, the perpetual trauma circle just keeps going around and around and around and around, right? Because nobody wants to sit in a room and have a debate or talk about why we're angry, why we're resentful, why we have rage, right? And if you look at it, we have probably the most traumatized group of leaders on the planet, right? If you look at Trudeau's history, he's fucking traumatized. Look what we have a saying in psychology, there's always a reason for the behavior. And that behavior is a learned behavior from childhood. So his whole entire existence as a kid, what was he doing? He was hanging around communists. So what's he going to become? He's going to become a communist, right? These are all learned behaviors. Racism is a learned behavior. Hate is a learned behavior. Because we don't come out of the room, out of, our mom's wombs with hate. We don't come out with racism. It's taught. It's learned. Right? So if you can learn those behaviors, you can unlearn them.
Do you think that racism is as big of a problem as the mainstream media sort of portrays in today's society?
Yeah, they use it, right? They use it to divide, right?
But do you think it's as, like, when I go outside, and again, I live in Vancouver, so there's, this is a place where people would, you'd be more accepted if you were, a murderer than a racist, probably. There's not a lot of racism here. But when I look around, or even if I visit the United States, I don't see, quote, racism. You know what I mean? I don't, when I go in, I see people of all different backgrounds sort of getting along, going about their day. You don't see, you just don't, for me, it's hard for me to see it. And I'm mixed. I'm, half Chinese. I was called racist names when I was a kid, but that doesn't mean that I think that, like, I don't think that means that there is necessarily this agenda against Asians or whatever. Maybe after COVID, we saw a little bit more racism towards Asians. Do you think that racism is, like, as big of an issue? Because personally, for me, I think that it is used by the mainstream media to sort of divide people into groups. And when people are divided into groups, it's easier to control them.
100%, right? It's all, it's all about that, right? I'm a minority myself, I'm Métis, half Cree, half white, but I've lived pretty much a white existence, right? And I'm called a racist. I'm a minority and I'm called a racist. You know what I mean? So
people call you a racist?
Oh yeah, of course.
Why? Because you are conservative?
Yep. Well, because I'm a patriot, I guess. So
Trudeau is like, if anyone who's in these who supports the freedom rallies, often they're racists and white supremacists.
They go against the narrative. They go against the narrative, and if you go against the narrative, that's all they have is name calling. But they can't define it. They can't define it, right? No. It's just a word. It's just a word. That's all it is, right?
He's the one who's been doing fucking blackface. I don't know about you, but I've never done blackface once in my life.
Me neither.
This guy's been doing it like multiple times because he actually thinks it's kind of funny. Well, and to be honest, I do think it's funny. I think there's comics doing blackface. Ted Danson and Sarah Silverman, these comics have all done blackface. Trudeau did blackface when he was portraying Aladdin, who is not even a black character. No. It's pretty funny. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Well, liberals are the most racist people on the planet.
Oh, that I agree with. Because all they see is race, right? They see everything in color.
Exactly. Yep. But they do it to divide and conquer, right? So.
Do you still play hockey at all? Like recreationally?
I don't play recreationally. I do lots of charity stuff. That's the only time I'll put my equipment on. So. Yeah.
Do you still enjoy the game of hockey?
When I'm actually out there playing, yeah. I don't enjoy getting my equipment on. I don't enjoy dragging my bag to the rink. I just, but for good causes, I'll put my equipment on.
We haven't really talked about jiu-jitsu at all on this podcast, and this is a jiu-jitsu podcast. Have you ever seen Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Do you know what it is? Do you follow MMA at all?
Yeah, I follow MMA, yeah, because to me, when I was a kid growing up, if I had an issue and a problem, we went out on the playground, we beat the shit out of each other, and at the end we got up, shook each other's hand, and went our separate ways. To me, that's godly masculinity. Having a gun, I'm just a coward. That means I can't stand up for myself, and I can't stand up for my beliefs. I need a gun to do that? No, no, no. I have these, right? The this is my protection. And if you beat me, hey, I have even more respect for you because you stood up. You stood up, right? And that's how I see, mixed martial arts is, you have two people who are putting their asses on the line in front of an audience, and that's I'm okay with that.
Aside from the scraps that you got into in the street and in hockey and everything like that, have you ever trained martial arts before?
I've never done it.
Is that something that you would ever do, or is it just you're at a point in your life where there's no point to do that now? Like
Yeah,
does
I,
I was gonna
I'm an
say
old,
does
I'm an old
jujitsu
man.
interest you at all?
Well, I think from a pure mental and physical aspect, yeah, I think it's great to learn that kind of discipline, right? You know, I think martial arts is, from a pure mental perspective, I think is hugely beneficial to anybody,
Yeah.
right?
One thing I
Because
would love to see would be, if two guys are going to be qualified to run a country, and we are going to potentially elect these individuals into office, I would like to see them participate in some form of combat,
yeah,
hand
yeah,
to hand combat, or even that could be the deciding factor, honestly, because it would show so many character qualities that I think are missing from
yeah,
today's leaders in the world. Bravery, youth, problem solving, courage. All of these things are lacking, I feel like, in our leaders nowadays. So I've
yeah.
always said, and I'm not talking about Trudeau boxing an old man and getting his ass kicked. Like, I want to see two political opponents
No,
grapple it out or have a
you know
duel
what?
of some sort.
Of all the things I've seen him do, like that's probably one of the things I have respect for him is that he actually fucking got in the ring, you know?
So a lot of people, we'll wrap this up pretty quickly. A lot of people, you even yourself on the show use the word conspiracy theorist. It's a word that's been thrown around basically to label anyone who questions the mainstream narrative, right?
Hmm.
But I want to ask you, like, do you have a conspiracy theory that, is there one that, is kind of a sacred cow in terms of the mainstream that you really think like, no, like this definitely didn't happen, or this isn't how it's portrayed, like a 9/11 or a moon landing or anything like that?
The only conspiracy theory I have is God wins. That's it. That's it. Right? That's how I live my life, and I try to treat people with respect and honor them, and compassionate about their pain. You know, that's that's how I live my life. I don't want to get involved in that stuff that's way out there. I just try to live the way that God wants me to live, and that's to be a kind, compassionate, empathetic person who's there for anybody who needs help, right? Because you know I have I've lived a life where I've pretty much experienced as much as a human being can experience on every sort of level, and I know what emotional pain and suffering feels like, and I think it's unnecessary. And I also think that it's you can change, and that you can become a person of faith, a person of integrity, all those things, and so that's what I try to bring to the table is that, and truth, right? Truth. All I'm trying to do is discern the truth, at the end of the day. And truth is probably the most powerful thing that we have, right? That's why these people who are running the world, they're living lies. They're telling lies. They're convincing you of their lies, right? And the thing about telling a lie is once you tell a lie, it's got to last the rest of your life. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to get exposed. And that's exactly what's happening, is these leaders are all being exposed. And so they lie on top of a lie, on top of a lie, on top of a lie. And, at the end of the day, they don't even know what the truth is. Like Trudeau doesn't even know what the truth is anymore.
He's just a puppet.
Yeah. And, I say this a lot of times on podcasts, is if I was advising Justin Trudeau, this is what I'd do. I'd get up on the podium one day and I'd say, listen, everybody, I've been blackmailed and compromised. And
this is you, Justin Trudeau, talking.
Yep. This is what I would tell him to do. I would say, I'm compromised. I'm blackmailed. I've done some really horrible things that I'm not proud of. And you can see it every time he talks. He is always looking at the floor, and that's shame, right? And when he's speaking, I don't listen to what's coming out of his mouth. I look at his nonverbal communication, right? And through that, I know that he's compromised. I know that he's confused, and he's in so far deep that he can't see a way out. And, I've been there. I have been there in my life. And the only thing I hadn't tried was telling the truth. And when you tell the truth, then you give people the opportunity to forgive you. And he would become a bigger hero by doing that than doing what he's doing right now.
Agreed.
Right?
Do you have compassion for Justin Trudeau?
100%, because I know he's in pain. I know he's suffering. You can see it, right? If you look at his nonverbal, that guy's in pain. That guy's suffering.
Why doesn't he do that?
Well, because nobody's probably ever said that to him, right? Why don't you just come clean? Why don't you just tell the truth? Right? So, like I reached out to Tiger when he was going through all of his shit, and that would be the advice I would give him. Just tell us the truth. And he did get there eventually. And guess what? We forgave him. And he's even more popular now than he was when he was winning fucking all that shit. But he was living 2 lives, right? He was living a double life.
How do you think, what advice would you give somebody who is, doesn't really think that, God exists. They don't have any connection with God. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that person just to sort of get them to start thinking about God?
Well, just try it, right? What do you got to lose? And I think that's the lesson that God is trying to teach us, is when all else fails, which is where I was at, 18, well, I have it right here. Hang on. $6,772 days ago, I was in that place. I knew I was going to die. If I kept doing what I was doing, I knew I was going to die. And I didn't want to die. And I didn't want to be in pain anymore. I didn't want to suffer anymore. And so I hit my knees in a washroom and I asked God to take away the obsession to drink and do drugs. And the next day I woke up and I haven't had a drink or drugs since. And I surrendered. I turned my will and my life over to the care of God. And when I did that, my life changed. My life got better. My relationships got better. You know, I repaired a lot of the relationships that I fucked up that were my fault because I was living in pain. Right? So, you know, if you can't see a way out, the only way out is through God. It's through faith. It's through prayer, meditation, right? That's how I turned my life around, right? And that's how I become more successful away from the game than I ever did playing the game, right? Because what I'm doing now matters, right? Life and death matters. People matter. People who are suffering matter, right? So, you know, hit your knees. Say, God, hey, I need help. And he'll help you, right? He's helped me. He's helped millions of people, billions of people, right? And all you got to do is have a conscious contact with him every day, right? You know, they say prayer is talking to God. Meditation is listening to God, right? And we don't practice that, right? So that's what I would say to somebody who doesn't have faith, right? Why are you hurting? Why are you so angry? Why are you so resentful? Because you don't have faith. And if you have faith, guess what? Those things will disappear.
What are you most grateful for?
Sobriety. My greatest accomplishment in life is my sobriety. Because without it, I have nothing. Right? You know, like alcohol and drugs to me is like a solvent. When I put it in my body, things start to disappear. Wives, jobs, family, you know, everything disappears. But if
Sorry, go ahead.
If I don't do those things, then life sort of has a way of showing you where you're going, what you're supposed to be doing. Purpose, right? Purpose.
Your purpose disappears when you put those things in your body?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Absolutely.
Would you say that is the same for all addictions?
Yeah.
Regardless of what substance you're using,
Doesn't matter.
what you're doing, when you
Yeah.
become addicted, you lose track of what's important. You lose track of
Self.
your purpose.
You lose track of self, right? Yeah. You know, when addiction takes a hold of you, that's all you think about. How am I going to get high? How am I going to, right? You know, it's hard being an addict. It's really fucking hard being an addict, right? But now that I'm not, life isn't that difficult, right?
What is your biggest fear?
I don't have any fear. If I have God, if I wear the armor of God, I don't have any fear.
Man, awesome. Theo Fleury, I think I've taken enough of your time today. That was an awesome, profound conversation, and I really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, do you have anything you want to say? Any links or how can the people reach you?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
You know, if you're looking for a speaker for an event, just go to theofleury.life. And I'm on all social media platforms, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, at Theo Fleury 14. Yeah. And, you know, I always say this, you know, if you're out there and you're struggling and you don't have anybody to talk to, you know, send me a PM on one of those platforms and I guarantee you I'll get back to you within a half an hour.
I'm going to include all of those links in the show notes for the people. Hey, can I ask one more question before we get out of here?
Sure.
If you could do it all over again, you know, everything, you're out of your mother's womb, you're a young child, and you know the potential, the type of talent that you could possess in hockey. You know your purpose as a speaker. What would you change?
One thing.
Not a thing?
Nope. No. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Everything I experienced was part of the plan. So, all the pain, was all part of why I was here, right? There are no coincidences in God's world, right? So, I look at all my trauma now and I see it as a gift, right? It wasn't a burden, it was a gift. Because without those experiences, guess what? You're not reaching out to me and asking me to be on your podcast, right? And I look at life completely different than, most people. And, there's a lot of gifts in pain and suffering. If you're willing to go through the pain and the suffering, at the end of it is a gift, right? And my gift is that people who come to me, I understand where they're at, right? I know where they're at. I know that pain. I know that suffering. And so I have compassion and empathy for that, right? But I also, have hope as well. I bring hope to the table. I give them inspiration through, my struggles, right? That I was able to overcome all of that and become, the person I am today. And without that struggle, I don't know where I'd be, who I'd be, So, I'm grateful for those experiences. I don't look at them as, negative. I look at them as positive, Even my abuser, right? Even my abuser, he was a gift that was put in my life, right? Not a burden.
Wow. Amazing. Guys, if you want to support the show, you can check the links in the bottom. Appreciate everyone tuning in, and I really appreciate you, Theo. I'm forever a fan. You're an inspiration, and thanks for everything you're doing, both for what you did in your hockey career and for what you're doing now, which, as you say, is much more important. And the people needs more people doing the things that you're doing. And I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Matt.
All right, guys. Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. Take care. Bye.
This is the greatest day of my life, greatest day for my family. I love everybody in Canada. This is the greatest feeling. We're number one, and they can't take that away from us.